Gonna take a sentimental journey. Gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. Got my bag and got my reservation. Spent each dime I could afford. Like a child in wild anticipation, long to hear that all aboard.
And welcome home, folks, to the best of Riverdale Dolton. And your narrator here, Carl Gernovich. I grew up in Riverdale at 140th Court at State in the 50s. In the background, Dave's Place Tavern around 1950. The folks are celebrating New Year's Eve. We've got a potpourri of movies for you, folks, from 1941 to 2001. And our next scene here will take off to the streets of Riverdale and Dolton in the year 2001 to get you a bit reacquainted. Hey, Dad. That's my dad, Louie. Take it away, Bill Bilby and his camcorder, coming up. And welcome to Riverdale, but it's 1942, just for now. We're looking east from the Illinois Central Railroad Station. Look at that, nothing there, except maybe the Edmund J. Sullivan building there in the center, a little white one. And here it is today. Well, 2001, a few extra buildings. Old 144th Street. We're standing up on them little steps by the IC. There's the old Coke's food store and other stores over the years. And there's how they looked in 1992. Presently being rebuilt to a Family Dollar and a bank. Boy, things change, don't they? And looking down Atlantic Street, looking north towards the park. And there's where the old Ben Franklin stood. Later the Family Dollar. And it burned down, I think, about 2001. And old Marge's Delicatessen, that red store. And Century Hardware, Hank's Barber Shop, Evans Drugs. Oh, a dress shop, gift shop, oh, a lot of stores in that section there on the north side. And another view of that north side, Bernetti's Pizza. That place burned down too, about 2001. There's the old Evans Drugs, now a video store, Midtown Video. There's how it looked when Evans opened in 1967. Wow. Look at them cars. And the old White Hen Pantry and a beauty shop there for many years. That center section is one a lot of people know going way back, because that's where Evans Drugstore was, and Mike's Sunshine Market, and the neighborhood cleaners. And this is how they looked in 1952. Wow. About the only building there. You can see the Edmund J. Sullivan Real Estate Building in the back on the right. This was a military parade, probably Memorial Day, who knows. And we're here at Wentworth now, the old shoe store on the right, many years ago. We go a little bit quick because we got a lot to get through. There's the old currency exchange, the cleaners. And the old Evans Drugs there is now the administrative building for the Village of Riverdale. There's the old Haynes Craft building, that little laundromat. There it is, back in the 70s. Original Ben Franklin was right next to it till it moved across the street. Sherwin-Williams paints were there. Oh man, how many? And there's the telephone building, now the School District 148 headquarters on the right. Moe's Snack Shop, Jonita's Apparel used to be down there. And here's an interesting section built in about 1950. And it used to be Maurice Menswear. They had a shoe store there and a bakery. And the old Jewel Food Store, remember that? And now the Riverdale Library. That's where most of these pictures come from, by the way. And the folks there do a great job. And one of my favorites, just closed, was Hank's Barber Shop, just across from the library. Opened in 1953, and Hank was still cutting hair up until 2004. I got one of the last haircuts there. And here's Hank. He retired at 86, I believe. There he is. That store hasn't changed inside at all. I got my first haircut there and my last one. Well, last one last year. There's the old Ivanhoe Park. And now they smoothed out the hill to the IC. It's still about the same. Oh man, how many baseball games we play there. And Old Park School back there. Well, it's changed, but this is how it looked in 1953 when they built it. Went to grade 3. And let's take a ride in the old jalopy and see a few sights around Riverdale and Dolton. We can't get everywhere. We'll get a few. There's the old telephone building on the right, the school district offices. And Dr. Blumenthal's on the right there at Clark. We're by the Edmund Sullivan Real Estate building there on the left. Coming up to Dearborn Street. And a little store and the hobby shop was on the left there. And the homes are about all the same as they were back then. In some areas, it's as if nothing's changed in 50 years. It's kind of striking. Folks have kept the homes up real well. And we got a beautiful day here. And Bill Bilby's doing a great job on the camera. There's a J.D. Brim house on the left. Kind of a fancy house for Riverdale. And what do we got? I see something up ahead here. Boy, oh, Lord in heaven. Look what we got here, folks. We have a good humor truck. A little bit different than one we remember, but there you go. Some things never change.
WJOB, your station for news.
Hey, we've got 55 more minutes to spend together. Then my mommy said I had to come home.
It's time for the sound of hot hit music on The Jan Gabriel Show.
Hey, back to the Action Sound Survey. We do go right now here on the Gabriel Crew.
And that was Jan Gabriel, a local record hop and disc jockey from the 60s. Got to start at Popple's Under 21 Teen Club in Riverdale. And here's Bill Bilby's house. Kind of neat because if we look at it here, this is how it is now. And boom, that's how it was when it was built in the 1940s. Boy, nothing around there. All onion fields back then. Boom, back to the future. And on the left there, the Gallaghers. And old 146th Street. And coming up near Roosevelt School would be on the right.
working on that Action Sound survey dated February 7th through the 14th, 1967. And, of course, let's get to it.
Let's draw another 45.
All the monkeys on deck right now. I'm indeed A.B. Levi.
Number 2.
He blew it.
Those guys always have to monkey around, don't they?
And there's a 145th and State, and there's a cinder block house. One of our favorites. Right on the northwest corner. And we're going back down 145th here towards Dearborn. There's the Brim House. Going to turn north here. Yeah, beautiful day in Old Riverdale. How many Sunday afternoons did we take a walk down the sidewalk, go to the park, go to Ben Franklin, or maybe even the little store if you lived in this section here on 144th and Dearborn. It used to be a hobby shop and a little store. In fact, Queen of Apostles Church got their start there. They used to hold services there, amongst other things. And we're headed west down 144th. There's the old Edmund J. Sullivan Real Estate. I always used to think he ran the Ed Sullivan Show when I was a kid, but he just built half of Riverdale. There's a shot of the complex. And passing LaSalle here. The old Evans Drugs on the right. White Hen Pantry there. That a couple people I know worked there, like Martha Humphrey. And on the left there, now in 2005, there's a CVS pharmacy. Huge pharmacy building, and on the right they're building a bank and a Family Dollar. So a lot of building going on in Riverdale. Oh, here we come up to a spot where a lot of people got their first kiss, the old IC station and the viaduct. And one thing I get a kick out of is what they thought Riverdale would turn into. But this is what it would look like. They thought in the 1940s. There's the IC station in the center. Didn't turn out that way, did it? On the left would have been the old Ivanhoe Park, and the yellow buildings there, the Indiana Harbor Credit Union building, Arthur W. Ruff Agency, and Dr. Krantz was there for a bit, and the old Ivanhoe Bike Shop. Remember that? My goodness. And on the right, Vesuvio's Pizza. Actually, this is the oldest building on 144th, the first one built, and used to be Bill Bilby's father had a grocery store there. Of course, many will remember this one here. I shouldn't say old to us, it was the new post office, but they've got a newer one since. It's really neat. And it's on 138th and near Halstead. And we're going down Eggleston here towards 143rd. Yes, and here we're going down 143rd towards Ivanhoe Park, west side of Ivanhoe Park. And they really smoothed the hill up there to the Illinois Central, or Metra, as they call it today. Used to have a big old sign there down to the right in bricks that said Ivanhoe. So folks passing by in the IC could see the name of what our town here was supposed to be, but really never came to be, Ivanhoe. They couldn't do it because another town had that name. And heading down on School Street here, heading northbound. And the oldest house in Ivanhoe is up there on the right. First little house. Bigger house there. See it? oldest home left standing in Ivanhoe. On the left would be the old police station, fire station. That was dedicated in '61. We got a little program on that one coming up. And up ahead, oh Lord, the famous Ivanhoe area, Washington Hill, and known for soapbox derby and the best winter sledding known on the face of Riverdale. Right here, right on that left side. And of course, Old Washington School, built in 1923, and they're about to make a new addition to that here in 2005, 6 or so. Used to be called Highlawn School, and we're getting to 139th and School Street here. Not a whole lot changed down here either. Now we're headed towards Tracy and Stewart. We're going to take a quick gander at the old grain towers, still standing in 2005, and we're going to have a little show on that coming up, so you'll see more. Oh, 138th Street, and heading down by the old Riverdale Pizza, which was on the right and on that strip mall on the left. That's the original right there. And of course, Bummy's Tavern up here, and the old Parkview Lanes used to be on the right here. Oh, they're gone, and Riverdale Park is on the left, and that hasn't changed much. And of course, we're coming here to the 137th IC station. Under the old IC bridge. Now on Illinois Street. You don't want to hear me singing. A lot of old homes here on the right. A couple doctors lived here. I think Dr. Collar lived there. And up ahead is the old Acme Tap. And that building goes back to the 1800s in Riverdale. Used to have a spire on it. And in the back, it used to be the original IC station back when the Illinois Central was on the ground, back in the late 1800s, 1900s. And we're going east on 137th Street. The old main drag of Riverdale. On the left would have been Fred's restaurant, very well known. And there it was as it looked in 1943. It burned down later. Of course, things change over time. Originally, Riverdale didn't expect to get much bigger than 137th Street and a few blocks north and south. They never imagined Ivanhoe would come when they planned this town. It started in 1892. And on the right would have been the old and original Village Hall. Kind of spooky. And behind it, the fire and police station. Look at the siren on the top. We used to hear that every day. And on the left there, the old Wonder Inn. That burned down. Originally Kern and Kipley Feed Store. Way back. They're doing a lot of rebuilding and new home building on this block now in 2005. And on the right there is Shirley Koteff's old playground. She's from our Riverdale Dolton Online forum. She used to live down here. And up on the left, the old Calumet Hotel, or as many knew it, Felix's Colonial Club. A lot of businesses in there. Building is gone today in 2005, but most will remember it more as this. There you go. The old Folk Company on the right. Yeah, things change. There's the old Dale Theater. And many will remember it as Harold's Cleaners, but Riverdale did have a theater, and it went until about 1952 and closed. And 137th in Indiana, looking down Leiden. On the right-hand side was the old Riverdale Branch School, which was torn down in the mid-1940s. There, a number of old-timers would have attended. There you go. Boy, it's kind of hard to imagine that was there. And the old Riverdale Bank on the right. Now we're going north on Indiana. And on the right, the old Hess Barber Shop. Fred Hess ran it for many years. Mrs. Pegas. And, oh Lord, look up. We got a train. It figures. Oh boy, the city of eternal trains. Well, back to Indiana Avenue, we're going to head south. We're on 136th Street, Burchinsky Street now. And there's the old Riverdale Bank, Heritage Bank, on the right. And this is how she looked way back, about 1963. And up ahead is the old Miller home, which you'll see on the right. Dave Miller, who owned Dave's Place Tap. But back in the old days, right next to it was the original St. Mary's Church. And the home was a rectory for a while. And that's going way back, over 100 years ago. Well, I need some church with these trains up ahead, but let's see what's on the radio.
If the movie's ever going to make it in the United States, I don't know, but I think the record will. And all over Great Britain this week, it's number 6. 4 minutes after 8 o'clock on Channel 89. British Billboard time on a Sunday. Ron Riley's my name, and these people singing for Mr. Wrigley.
You love double mint gum. Double good, double mint gum. Double fresh flavor, double smooth too. Double mint, double delightful to chew. You love double mint gum. Get double everything rolled into one. You love double mint gum. Double good, double mint gum.
What now, my love? It's Mitch Ryder on the Pip program at Chicago 10. It's 10 past 9 o'clock. Before that zip code with the 5 Americans are Pip Coke. Stand by, here's another Coke wind spin. Can you name the 3 recording stars in this Coke commercial?
Stamp your feet, clap your hands.
1.
Wink your eye at the waiter man. Order a Coke with 2 straws in, and then we begin the chin to chin. Hey, God, give it a whirl.
Things go better with Coca-Cola. Things go better with Coke. People go better with Coca-Cola. Things go better with Coke. Hip, hooray, WCFL. Hip, hip, hooray, WCFL. Hip, hip, hooray, WCFL.
Frontwards or backwards, friends, it's the same. That's PIP. Send your dollar tonight.
And the old train's still there, folks. Lord in heaven. But they brought us jobs and money, so can't complain too much. But we got to get going here. Boy, you used to get stuck in there. Remember, they had a little trap where if you got between 2 sets of trains, you couldn't get out. So looks like one guy gave up there, didn't he? But this was Riverdale and Dalton, part of our lives. Well, we're going to go back, heading north in Indiana, towards 137th. We're going to turn right down Leiden up here, a little gas station on the corner. Used to be a drugstore here, a little hamburger place on the corner. The old Riverdale, Chicago Riverdale Lumberyard. There's Mao's Hardware, early 50s, and sort of later became Quant's Hardware down the street. Oh, a lot of buildings down here in history. And a lot of history down here. Louis Reich had a meat store right to the left here. And the interesting complex here on the left, the white building now, was quite a few stores in the past. The Riverdale 5 and 10, a dime store, drugstore, Spazzeri's restaurant, one time the phone company, the post office, a lot more. Nice building, a little bit of art on the top. And many will remember this place, True Value Hardware, or Quant's Hardware Store. It was run by Art Quant originally. Also called Riverdale Hardware. Dr. Collar had an office on top there. And Hennessy Hornbug Funeral Home, amongst other names, on the right. Bachman Funeral Home. St. Mary's on the left. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And one of the favorites, everybody here, Papa Damiani's Pizza on 138th. And Lincoln. Actually, Lincoln starts right across from 138th here. We're still on Leiden. And started around 1957, still here. Run by the son of the family, Lou Damiani. There's a shot of the front and the rear. And still going today. And there is Carol Damiani on the left on the inside from a few years ago. Still making pizza, so stop in there sometime. And there's the corner building there was originally a bank. It was the Pointer office for many years. Gigi's 138th Club on the left there. Brown Funeral Home on the right. I can't keep up. And there's the old Thompson Clinic. And Thompson family was well known in Dalton and Riverdale. And a lot of us got our dog bites taken care of there. It's closed down today. A little bit too small for what they're doing. And, of course, the old Tri-City Bowl. Oh, boy. How many times have we been in there? Look at that big bowling pin. Of course, that's closed 2001, but opened up in 1949. And run by the Herman family and Tom Keyes. There's a Little League field. We'll get to that later. Of course, the railroad tracks again. And here's an interesting one on the left. Known by a number of names, but back in the 50s it was called Jack's Tap. And there is a combination picture of then and now. Hasn't changed. And there's Jack Hay on the inside. Oh boy. And there was, there's a gift shop here on the right. I remember it once as being a little restaurant in the 50s. Right there. Of course, we're coming up to where Lindell's gas station was and Malloy Coal back in the old days. and the railroad tracks, and there's the Dalton Municipal Center. Originally was a school. Well, I remember that place. Remember the library on the second floor? The basement's got a jail still there. They don't use it though. But a beautiful building and well kept up today. And let's go down Lincoln. And the Dalton Library would be to the left here. And up ahead, Dalton Liquors, favorite hangout of many. Old Hartman's Bakery was over here on the right. Oh, so many things. Mustard Seed down the street, Dalton Shoe Clinic. There's the bank, savings and loan in the old days. There's Nick's sports page at one time. He's down in Crete now in the Hi-Fi bar. And there's the old Dalton show. Oh boy. And it's now called Secrets, sort of a lounge. Oh boy, look at the high part back where the screen was. And a lot of us saw a lot of movies there. Yeah, the old Dalton show. I think it was built about 1914. And the bank here. And we're looking at 142nd and Chicago Road. Just too many stores here. Koch's Foods, A&P's on the left. The National Food Store was on the right. Dalton Department Store. Newman Drugs on the left. And just a lot going on. Here's a picture from back in '76. You see Charlotte's Store for Women, Davis Jewelers, and Taco's place there on the east side. And of course, Horny's Value Village. That's the newer store. Oh, just too many stores down here, but this is where we spent our money. And old Dick the Barber is still there in 2005. He started in 1963. Dr. Levinson, still there. And on the right here was the old Homestead Tap. We don't have a good picture, but it was right on the corner there. And here's a shot looking sort of north down. You could see that little Gas for Less. It was run by a guy named Frank Wessey. Rigoni's auto body shop. Oh, you know, Dalton Pet Store was there. Now down a couple blocks on the left on 144th was the old ranch. Remember that place? Little restaurant, soda bar. Back in the 50s, 60s. I lost a lot of teeth there. And there's a shot of the inside via Jeff Zoller. Nice pics here. And we're headed down 144th here, going westbound towards the tracks. Of course, the old Ivanhoe Manor School would have been on the right. It's been replaced by the larger Harriet Tubman School now. Of course, that whole Ivanhoe Manor section there was to the right. There's the newer school in the distance. CE&I Railroad Tracks. There's the old Jewel and Osco store. And coming up to 144th in Indiana. And one of my favorite places when I grew up was on the corner there. Remember this place? The old B&K root beer stand. Oh boy. And another beautiful pic from Jeff Zoller. Oh boy. And it was in the late 50s that little stand operated. Well, I'm going to turn on the radio here and see what's on.
Sears has swinging new Johnny Unitas jeans in the student department right now. They're trim cut to feel right on you, and they're perma-pressed for the neat look. Wide wale cords in chili, tan, green, and navy, and diagonal twills in bronze, olive, and beige. Get them now in Sears student department.
And that's our little drive-about, folks. Couldn't get everywhere. We didn't realize how big our towns of Riverdale and Dolton were until we started hitting the streets. Boy, a lot of memories. And for as much as changed in the towns, that much more has really stayed the same. And they've done a good job that way overall. And let's see what's on the radio.
Revving it up, let's go to Drag City. Here's Jan and Dean.
Okay, a little drag racing thanks to video. And folks, we're going to take you around the towns with some old home movies, and hope you enjoy them. Well, remember the old grain towers in Riverdale? And for us kids, we thought they were skyscrapers. And one of them's still standing to this day. We found a little program at the Riverdale Library. It should be interesting for you.
There it stands, on the southern edge of Chicago, 12 stories high, a towering, crumbling, dilapidated mass of bricks, mortar, cement, wood, and holes. It's the Hales and Hutter grain elevator, built in 1896, nearly 100 years old. At one time, the Hales and Hutter elevator, along with nearby Arcady Mills, employed nearly half of suburban Riverdale. But now, a grand and impressive structure, once a thriving business, is considered by many an eyesore, a blight on the community. It's a dangerous structure. Within these buildings, curious youths have been hurt, and one man, paramedic Karen Mielke, was killed in an attempt to save a trapped youth, falling 67 feet to his death. The tragedy in 1981 shocked and alarmed an already outraged community. But the negative feelings many now hold about Hales and Hunter detract from a rich history of grain elevators in the South suburban area and the entire Midwest. The grain elevator has an important place in the history of agriculture, industry, and architecture throughout the United States. The grain elevator is perhaps the most prominent symbol of the Midwest. Their structures, majestic and impressive, borrowing liberally from ancient Greek architecture and from pyramid designs, stand as monolithic monuments to the agricultural way of life. Grain elevators, wrote J.R. Humphreys in his book, The Lost Towns and Roads of America, rose like strange towers and castles. The land of Oz did not seem far away. Most of the grain elevators nationwide were built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They were strategically built near railroads or near a body of water, so grain and feed could be easily unloaded and transported. In Illinois, it is possible to find both types. The Hales and Hutter elevator and the destroyed Arcady Farms Milling Company were built near a railroad in a small town called Riverdale.
Riverdale is a community which rests on the southern edge of Chicago. It was first settled in 1835 and was called Riverdale because it borders the Calumet River. Early Riverdale consisted of a number of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Among its important industries were lumber and distilling. And while the distilling industry died in 1889, interest in the product did not. The spot which held the distilling company was taken over by the Pope Beach Sugar Company. In the tradition of their European mother countries, settlers also brought agriculture to the region. Asparagus, onions, and sugar beets were three of the area's major crops. Also important to the region were the feed mill and grain elevator that rested on either side of the Indiana Harbor Belt Railroad, Arcady Farms Milling Company, and the Hales Grain Elevator. These two giants were two of the most important branches of their respective companies, and they served both the agricultural and employment needs of the community. Built in 1896, the Hales Elevator was founded by S.W. Edwards. The company was an innovator in several areas of the hay and grain business. The company was originally known as Hales and Edwards and was changed to Hales and Hunter in 1920. The primary product of Hales and Hunter was Redcomb Pioneer Feeds. Their distinctive trademark was Redcomb himself, the rooster whose giant likeness stared down at generations of area residents. Redcomb enhanced the larger-than-life image of the grain elevator. Redcomb was sold in 37 states in poultry feed outlet stores. One such store in Riverdale was run by local entrepreneur Conrad Kern, whose store operated from 1913 to 1944. Kern's store was located at 13601 Indiana Avenue, a location which is now a yawning, vacant lot. Kern was a local distributor of both Redcomb and Arcady feed and grain products. The Arcady Farms Milling Company began over 20 years later on the opposite side of the Indiana Harbor Belt. Arcady was founded by Arthur Meeker in 1914, and the mills were built by D.W. Albee, who also designed the Menard State Prison. Arcady was named after an area in Greece called Arcadia, considered one of the richest agricultural spots in the world. Leonard Danielson is one of the few surviving workers from the beginnings of Arcady. Danielson was the stepson of architect Albee, and as a young boy, played a role in its birth.
Well, my first duties was water boy. The water lines from Riverdale didn't run out that far at that time. And I used to have to carry a yoke, 2 buckets of water and dippers in them from the building construction gangs over to Wentworth Avenue. There was a water hydrant there. And that's as close as the water was at that time.
What were your general duties during most of the years that you worked at Arcady?
I was an electrical engineer. I innovated a lot of the stuff that was in the plant. We had that plant automated in 1932 already, which was unheard of. We used somewhere between 2 and 3 million kilowatt hours a month. And at that time, our average cost per kilowatt hour was 2 mils. It was public service at that time and not Commonwealth of Edison.
Arcady was one of the largest feed producers in the country, turning out 2,000 to 3,000 tons of feed per day. In Arcady's plant, chemical testing was done to make sure the feed met the company's rigid standards of quality control. Pneumatic unloading equipment emptied train cars of incoming materials in a matter of minutes. Feeder lines were used to mix the feed according to standards. Materials dropped down into the feeder lines from bins and was then sacked or processed. In addition to customer-ready mash feeds, Arcady also manufactured pellet feeds. It would run the mash through a series of pellet mills to manufacture a feed used by many farmers for cattle and other livestock.
You get the grain in like corn and wheat and barley and oats and things, and you grind it up, and then your laboratory creates a formula for so much protein and fat and fiber, and you mix it accordingly.
Finally, the grain would pour into the bag filling department, where it was put into 100-pound bags featuring a familiar Arcady logo. In its purest form, grain can be a dangerous product. Grain dust produced at the elevators is highly flammable. Hales at Arcady would suffer frequent fires and explosions caused by sparks which would ignite the dust. Arcady and Hales continued to provide steady employment for Riverdale area residents throughout the first half of the century. During the Depression, long lines would form outside of the two companies. Even during World War II, Redcomb and Arcady products received heavy distribution. But the war did take away many of the men who worked at Arcady and Hales. However, what the war tooketh,
The war also gaveth away.
Well, you know, the draft took away a lot of people, and as a matter of fact, I was involved with the Harvey Draft Board at the time too, and so we brought Jamaicans in as well from Jamaica, and they didn't work out too good. So all these prisoners came in. They were from Rommel's Africa Corps. I don't know how many 100,000 were taken. And we had 1,500 in the local camp here in Thornton Township. And we used about 150 of them. And Hales used about 30 or 40. And Swift over here and Hammond used about that many too.
About the prisoners themselves?
Oh, they were grand. There was nothing wrong. Every one of them spoke English. I learned some German from them. But only myself and one other person at the plant were allowed in their locker rooms. We had to have separate locker rooms and toilet facilities for them, and their food was brought out from Thornton every day. And as a matter of fact, they ate better than the public did. They had all the steaks and beef. I used to go there on weekends just to get a good meal. Yeah, I did. I'd take my son there, and he was just a little fellow at the time, 6 or 8 years old, and I got a piano for him from some church in Roseland, and they set that up in their community room at the camp, and so they made a little throne-like affair out of a chair and put it on top of the piano for my son, and they'd set him up there and they'd just worship him. You know, they missed their own children so bad. They'd cry. They would. They'd grab my son and from lap to lap, and they'd hug him. And when he'd come home, he'd have his pockets full of all kinds of Nazi trinkets, you know, their pins and stuff. They'd take them off of their uniforms and put them in his pocket. There was not a bit of trouble with them. My wall, one wall is just full of carvings that they made for me. Every one of the prisoners were high class. They were all professionals of some kind or other. They were all older men. Most of them were in their 50s in Rommel's Corps. And they weren't hard to get along with at all.
Workers at Arcady were paid wages that are by today's standards considered low. And yet all the workers in Hales and Hunter and Arcady were members of the American Federation of Labor and were paid competitive wages. After World War II ended, Riverdale shifted from an agricultural industrial town to an urban industrial suburb. At the same time, grain and feed production across the United States shifted from the large mills and elevators to preparation by the farmers themselves. It marked the beginning of the end for Hales and Arcady.
The feed business went out. Farmers made their own. Made their own supplements and ground their own. They got their little grinding mills and so forth in their barns, and this thing finally petered out. It was the end of an era.
The end of an era. Arcady was bought out by A.E. Staley in 1957 and remained open through the early 60s. Hales and Hunter closed soon afterward. In spite of its magnificent structure and historical importance, Arcady had outlived its usefulness. By the 1970s, it was gone. But the old Hales and Hunter elevator still stands. Shortly after its closing, the elevator was purchased by the Mickow Warehouse Company, which claims to no longer own the building. Meanwhile, the litigation battle continues. Why hasn't the Hales elevator been destroyed? Its proximity to the Indiana harbor belt makes dynamiting dangerous. And with ownership unclear, the cost is a problem, estimated at nearly $500,000. And so the stubborn Hales and Hunter elevator survives, its critics many, its admirers few. But we should remember that Hales and Hunter and Arcady Mills were two of the most important sites for grain and feed production in the country. Hale's sturdy resistance reminds us of a time past, the end of an era. For while the business of grain and feed production in Riverdale is long gone, the Hales elevator stands as something of a landmark, a monument to the farmer. It may be the end of an era for an industry, but twilight has yet to come to the great American farmers of the Midwest.
Okay, folks, here's a quiz. What was the only Hollywood movie ever made about Riverdale, Illinois? About the year 1958. Oh, how did you know? It was the Brain Eaters. Oh, Lord in heaven. One of those B movies that we used to watch at the Halsted Outdoor Theater about aliens coming from space. I think they landed in Homewood, and then they took over the town of Riverdale. And Leonard Nimoy was in the movie. His name's spelled wrong, but he was in there. So let's take a look at a few clips.
A few weeks ago, Riverdale, Illinois was just another quiet, small town. Then on that Saturday, shortly after midnight, a living nightmare began.
In this scene, a plane lands at the Riverdale airport. Look at the mountains. I think that might have been at, where at? 138th and School? You figure.
Washington had wired ahead that Walter K. Powers was to arrive in Riverdale to take charge of the spaceship investigation. Powers had requested that there be no publicity whatsoever.
Our social order is pure, innocent, as the exactitude of mathematics. We shall force the...
Well, the audio in this movie is bad, and so is the movie, but that is Leonard Nimoy. And speaking of Dalton, you wouldn't in a million years guess what this is. And that's right, that's Dalton Park, 1945. My goodness. Picnics were a big thing in Riverdale and Dalton in the 40s and the 50s and early 60s. People had a little more time back then. And that's the center of the park as it is even today with the trees. And this was shot by Dave Miller Sr., who owned Dave's Place, the tap on 13832 Indiana in Riverdale. And they loved their baseball back then. Look at the room. Now in the back would be where the train ran along Greenwood Road. You can see the tracks. You catch a little bit of Franklin School here in the background. And there's that picnic grove again in the center. That's still there to this day in 2001. That's one of the Millers there. They had horses. My goodness. You could ride a horse in Dalton Park back then. Somebody coming to the picnic in a suit? I don't think so. That could have been Easter Sunday. Kind of hard to tell. Looks a little bit cool out. And in the background, you see the tennis courts. They're still there to this day. Boy, they had a lot of room back then out in that park, didn't they? And next to nothing was built up in Dalton at that time. And check out these cars. My, my, my. I wonder how much those would go on eBay for today. Hello, old timer. And there you go. Look at that merry-go-round. Round and round she goes, where she stops and nobody knows. And of course the swings. It's all a kid needed that day, a set of swings and a merry-go-round. I think these people had a little bit too much. They can't even stand up for criminy. A World War II serviceman. How you doing? And the ladies taking care of their baby. Now, weren't those the good old days, folks? And as I said, they love their baseball. I think that's, could be Pete Miller pitching, could be Dave Miller. That's Molly Miller on the right. Pretty sure. And there you go. There's Dalton Park in the 1940s. And from Dave Miller Sr.'s camera, from 13738 Indiana Avenue in Riverdale. Here's some shots from the early 1940s on Easter Sunday. There's Indiana Avenue in the background. That's the Dave Miller home, still there today. And that's Shirley Miller with the red, Dave's daughter, and Dave Miller Jr. there with the hat. Classic car. You see Leiden Avenue in the background if you look good. And they probably just came from Riverdale Park. They used to have an Easter egg hunt out there every year. And look at them saluting. Of course, World War II was on. But I want to set you up. Look at that kid in the center. Now he's going to salute. And then look, the Nazi salute. Oh, boy. Shame on you. Oh, boy. And Easter Sunday was a big treat for us kids. And that's 13738 Indiana, the Miller home. Right down from Riverdale Bank, south a bit. And this is in front of Dave's Place Tavern. And this is a float for a July 4th parade from Drury's Beer. And we figure the 1940s, 1950. And the kids are all getting excited. That is a fancy float. And that's 138th in Indiana. Now we're on 142nd near Chicago Road for a parade. They're walking right by the old National Food Store back then and Dalton Department Store later. And look at this. This is throwing the candy and the coins out. And there's the National Food Store, Dalton Department Store, Comcast Cable in the back. That's what it looks like today. So she's right near that red X at 142nd and Chicago Road. And, of course, they had their baton twirlers. Not sure if this is a military parade or July 4th. They had parades for a lot of things. Now, look at that. That's the Wessie Oil Company, the Sinclair truck. And then you see Choice Meats. We think that's the Coke Meat Market, which was at the corner. And that's what it looks like basically today, 142nd and Chicago Road. And on the corner there was Herzog's Store for Men back then. Of course, they moved further north there in later years. Not much from this parade. This is about it. And they turn north on these. Now we go to 13832 Indiana, Dave's Place Tavern. And Dave Sr. has taken some pictures here. And look at the railroad. Oh, Lord. The tracks still there today, of course. And those were steam locomotives. There's Shirley Miller, his daughter, and his son Dave Miller Jr. just south of the tracks on 138th, right in front of Dave's Place Tavern. Now, today in 2005, it's Jimmy's Place. And early 1940s, about 1942 or so. And there was a tavern as it would have looked back then. Of course, it's changed. Now here's another view of a patron coming into the tavern. He's ready. And here's a beer delivery from a beer distributor in Homewood, Illinois. Budweiser. Early 1940s. And back to Indiana Avenue. We're looking north from Dave's Place. And you can see the Phillips 66 gas station on the right on 138th in Indiana. And as I was told, owned by Abby Millers about that time. And that's again looking north down Indiana, right where the railroad tracks are. Look at that old car. Wow. Looks like winter time. Yes, sir. And there's a steam locomotive in the back looking east from the tavern. Oh, those trains. And they were super long in those days. Indiana Avenue. And welcome to Dave's Place, folks. My name's Carl Dernovich. I grew up 2 blocks from Dave's, and my dad Louie went there all the time. There's Shirley Miller, Dave's daughter, standing next to the tavern back in the late 30s. And there's Dave's today, now known as Jimmy's Place. Still going. And we found these old home movies thanks to Dave Miller Jr. and his wife Barb, and they're just fantastic. New Year's Eve's parties from the 1940s and the 50s, and a who's who of Riverdale. So we can't apologize for some of the names we got wrong. We got these from a lot of memories, but hey, why don't you place your order, and let's go inside and see what's going on. And from the mid-1950s, from the Colonial Club on 137th Street in Riverdale, a couple shots looking east, right in front of the Colonial Club. There's 137th in Indiana in the back. The old tavern would have been that spire on the right. Phone company was on the left, the old red brick building, and a Colonial Club where the awning was. And that's the Kotef family. And I believe that yellow building in the back was a gas station. You can see Mao's Hardware to the right a little bit in the back. That's Buzz Kotef, who was a golf pro. Of course, married to the Riverdale Dolton Forum's Shirley Kotef. Look at those cars. Wow. 137th Street. And remember the old hula hoops. Oh boy. And those were a big hit in the 50s and the 60s. As I remember, they cost $1.59 at the Ben Franklin. And these are Shirley Hay Kotef's children. And their home in Harvey. Doing some pretty good tricks. There's Shirley. Oh, goodness. Go for it. Lord heaven, look at her go. And here you're going to see an old trick called the comeback. See it? Whoops, there you go. Hula hoops. One of our favorite toys growing up. And from 1948, the Thornton Township High School class of 1948 graduation ceremonies. This V.I. Dave Miller Sr., his daughter Shirley was graduating at the time. There's the Thornton Band, and they're located in the old football field of that day, where today would be the field house. That's Dottie Hobbs. See the old garage in the back. And the garage is still there today, part of the school, the northeast corner of 151st and Center there. And here come the graduates. And they had a lot of them. Sure was nice to graduate outside. A little bit cooler than the the inner gym that I graduated from in 1968. (1948) graduation. And big excitement in the south suburbs in March of 1966 when Thornton won the state championship in basketball. Here are some clips from the game. Here's old Vince Lloyd. And guess who was an announcer? Here's Johnny, Ed McMahon. And there's the Thornton mascot and cheerleaders before the game, which I'll blow it for you. Thornton won. Oh, boy. Assembly Hall, Champaign in Illinois. There's Bob Landowski, one of the starters. He's in Arizona nowadays. And Paul Gillum, who is in 2005 a teacher at Thornton High School. And their center, Jim Ard, who went on to the world champion Boston Celtics in California nowadays. And Rich Rattery, who was the top scorer and star of this game. They called him the Rat. And, of course, Lamar Thomas, who I met just a few weeks ago. He's doing fine. Hey, let's let it ride and watch some from the game. And what about those Falcons in 71-72? 2 championships in a row, voted the greatest high school team of Illinois history to date. Here's a few clips from the game. Old Quinn Buckner, Greg Rose, Boyd Batts, Mike Bonzik. Watch this. Behind the back. Oh, watch this one. Bing. They set a record 105 points in winning the championship game. Watch this. See ya. Thornridge Falcons. And there's the old high school nowadays. That's still basically the same on Sibley. And Coach Ron Ferguson, who went on to Bradley University. And what a great tradition. And here's a regular old Riverdale girl and late 1920s Thornton graduate who was the first woman to win a gold medal in track and field for the Americans in 1928 Olympics. And here's an interesting clip on Betty's life.
July 11th, 1928. The SS President Roosevelt sails out of New York Harbor for Amsterdam. The voyage will take 9 days, and then the ship will be the Olympic Village for the United States team, where they will be quartered in Amsterdam. One of the United States team members, 16-year-old Betty Robinson of Chicago. She will compete in the 100 meters, the first women's event in track and field Olympic history.
When I was in high school, I didn't even know the girls were running. And one day I had to take a train to go home. I took a train back and forth every day. But this one day, one of my teachers was up at the platform when he saw me running for the train. And when I got on the train, I sat down next to him, and he was surprised that I had made the train. And he said, I want to time you in a 50 tomorrow, so get your gym suit on and your tennis shoes and meet me after school.
Unknown and untrained, Betty Robinson amazed her coaches by making the United States Olympic team.
I was thrilled with the whole thing. Couldn't believe it was actually going to the Olympics. And Johnny Weissmuller, who was from Chicago too, you know, had told my coach that he would see that I was taken care of, and he would watch out for me like a chaperone.
July 31st, 1928. The final of the women's 100-meter dash. Betty Robinson, second from the right, leads. At the finish, she wins by a few inches.
I broke the tape, but I didn't know where anybody else was. I didn't even know I'd won until somebody came up to me. I was running so hard until some of the gals jumped out of the stands and came over and said, oh, you won, you won. And then the thrilling part was afterwards standing there and seeing the American flag go up in first place, you know, and hearing the Star Spangled Banner and my name up, and it makes me cry now.
How do I remember Betty? Well, she was a beautiful girl, very friendly, very competitive, always ready for a foot race, a game of tag, or a baseball game in the Bowen schoolyard of old. I know Miss Hickey will remember those days. By the time she was a teenager, every young lad in the neighborhood had a crush on Betty, including yours truly.
I didn't know.
Of course, that was when we all reached the age when we knew the difference between boys and girls. Because of her love of sports and her competitive spirit, there were some unkind people who referred to Betty as the neighborhood tomboy. Now, we never said that to Betty's face, and we never, ever said it when her father was around. I knew it.
And at 139th and Lincoln was the Little League field for Riverdale and Dolton. Started around 1949. There's the old field on the top. And pretty well the same today. Same backstop in 2005. Many will remember the concession stand and the equipment stand. And there's a team photo from 1950. My dad coached that team. And we have some excellent footage here from 1951 from Dave Miller Sr.'s camera, who owned Dave's place, and mostly centering on his son, who is pitching here, Kenny Miller. Kenny lives out in Arizona today and runs a pizza place out in Mesa, Arizona, last I heard. This is from 1951, and the dugouts back then were dug out in the ground, as you could see, but they kept filling with water So they've since built them above ground. In the background, you can see the Tri-City Bowl. And this was called A Field back then. Look at that water tower. Remember that one? And, of course, there's Kenny in the dugout with some of his friends, and the manager, Nick Lazo. And Little League was started by quite a few people. Frank Dorner, Ed Adams, and Ed Kipley Sr., Louis Dernovich, a guy named Mr. Jones, and it wasn't the first Little League in Illinois, as some feel. Actually, Kankakee was, but it was around the second one anyway. It was early. And there's the announcer. They were high tech in those days to have actually a PA system. The Dolton Riverdale Little League. And remember July 4th and the parades in Dolton? Oh, those firemen really put on a good show. This one here is from 1960, we believe, give or take a year. We're coming down Chicago Road. And this one here is the Riverdale Junior Firemen. And look at the car with the fins on the back. We were a little bit spacey in those days. And this one here says, too many cooks spoil the broth. This was the Kitty Day July 4th parade. They had one for the adults, one for the kids. This is Yvette's School of Dance. And we had quite a few dance and music schools around the area back then. I don't know what this guy's doing. Looks like a Green Beret. And looks like the American Legion or Junior Legion. Junior VFW. Of course, we had plenty of majorettes and baton twirlers in those days. Remember, my sister went to baton instruction. And the kids. Just dressing up and getting ready for the big carnival. And there's old Masovi's grocery. Remember that little white store? I don't know if it was on Angle or what, but we used to get Mom and Dad to go there and get us pop and groceries. Little mom and pop store. And the kids are all excited about the carnival. July 4th in Dolton. Around 1960. And here's a neat old home movie I found of the Riverdale Municipal Center dedication from 1961. And the filmmaker starts out by taking a look at Riverdale's original municipal center, which was located on 137th and Wabash. This is kind of dark, but that was built in about 1895. Here's the old Wonder Inn in the back. There it is. Oh, that place was a little spooky to me when I was growing up. a majestic building for our little town. And there's the fire department on the right, that little building, the original one. There's the newer fire department, built around 1926. The garage was in the rear, and the fire and police were on the other side. That was on 137th place in Wabash. They had that siren on the top. And that thing used to go off, was it Tuesday or Thursday at 10 a.m.? That's from about 1948 there. There's the new municipal center on 142nd and Stewart and Tracy. See the old grain towers in the back. Some classic cars in this little film. They're getting ready for the dedication ceremony. And Mayor Ed Kipley Sr. was the town honcho then. And there's the Thornton High School band. And it was November, so it was a little cool out. And I was 11 years old back then, and I attended this ceremony with my father, as did many people in the town. It was a big thing back then. There's one of the firemen. A little dark, as I said. These are home movies, folks. But Riverdale did know how to put on a good show. There's some of the majorettes. And it was a kind of a neat building, as I remember it. Today it's a school in 2005. There's some of the photographers who were hanging around on the roof. Probably Ed Siegel, I believe, and Chuck Renner were up there. And here's one of the pictures they took of the flag-raising ceremony. And some of the officers and policemen, firemen, and village officials. A good little town back then. And here's a Boy Scout troop that did a little parading in town, the Riverdale Scouts. Said these are a little blurry, but you get an idea. It takes you back, you know. And there's, looks like VFW, American Legion, probably Paul Gallpost. And there is Mayor Ed Kipley. And Ed passed in 2004. I met him in 2002. There's the new mayor, Zenobia Evans, very fine lady, and Ed's son on the right, who was also a mayor. Ed Kipley, a great man. And a view outside the center. Might see somebody you know in here if you slow it down. A little bit easier on DVD. I think that's Larry DeAnthony. Maybe with one of the SOLA members. Larry worked at Town and Sola's Liquors. That's who we think it is. And a view on the inside there in the fire department area. Boy, what a crowd, huh? And the young guys wearing them thin ties. That was a thing for 61. And some nice shots of the village residents. Here's our congressman, Ed Derwinski from South Holland. And a view of the crowd. Are you in there somewhere? 1961. And here's the brand new 2005 Fire and Police building, dedicated to police officer Wally Rolniak. Only problem is they could use a little bit later version police cars. And in 1967, Riverdale was 75 years old, so they celebrated with a Diamond Jubilee Parade down 138th. And we all love parades out there. Usually the Dolton July 4th was our big one. Riverdale didn't have a whole lot. And here we are about 138th in Michigan. Actually, more towards Wabash we're sitting on, looking sort of east. And there's the old IGA store and Riverdale Mart and other things there. Of course, firemen were always in all the parades. And those guys took care of us real well. 75 years old, 1967. There's that old hand pumper they used to have in almost every parade. I think that's from Dalton. And these are shaky. These were taken by Jack Hay, who was Shirley Kotev's father, with a 16 millimeter. And this is the Riverdale Park District float. And we take what we can get in home movies, folks. And this appears to be the beauty queens for the Jubilee. And here's an old Riverdale squad car from the 70s. Maybe one of those pulled up next to you. From the fine men in blue from Riverdale, Illinois. Oh, yeah. And behind them, Governor Otto Kerner stopped by. He was governor of Illinois back in those days. I used to like to pull out a lawn chair and have a few Cokes or beers and just sit back and talk with the neighbors. Good excuse for a parade. We had a little more time for them back then. Of course, kids always got into them. This one's really showing off. And last but not least, here's Big Nick Altavilla. He used to have a band in the area, and he's drumming away. 1967 Riverdale Parade.